Actions are really cool and they can save you a lot of time if you're processing multiple images. So let's just start with the really basics of looking at what exactly an action is and what it does. Begin by creating a new file, and I'm going to set mine to inches, about 11 wide and 6 tall, and I'm going to set mine to 300 pixels per inch and click OK. You'll need your Actions panel open, so go to Window and choose Actions. You should have the default Actions folder visible. It might be open. This little arrow, if you click on it, it shows the actions within that folder. If you don't have the default actions, you can obtain them by coming to the drop down for that panel, click on it, and choose Reset Actions. To begin with an action, no, we really need something for it to perform on, so I'm going to create a word and size it nicely so you can see it. And each one of these is an action. I know for sure that this cast shadow type one works well, so we'll use that. Just click on it to choose that action and then push play to run it. So it makes this kind of cool looking cast shadow in front of this object. Now remember doing drop shadows and gradient overlays and bevel embosses, that sort of thing. That's a layer style, and you can save those styles and apply them easily to type, but this is something different. You couldn't actually achieve this by fiddling with your drop shadow adjustment. This is actually working with layers and doing different things. Inside this, if we drop that down, there's all of the steps that happened. Now, let's make a much better version of this action, because right now it's not really that cool looking. It's the type with some cast shadow, but the type is no longer editable and the cast shadow is pretty flat. So I'm going to come to my history panel and go back to where I last had this as just a regular piece of type, and then come back to my actions. Actions can be organized into folders, so let's make a new folder in here by clicking on the folder icon at the bottom of the panel, and I'm going to name it New Actions. Now we're ready to record. To begin recording an action, click the New Action icon. And I'm going to call this Awesome Cast Shadow. Okay, everything we do now will be recorded and then we can repeat it at the click of a button. So to begin, I'm going to right click and change this into a into a smart object. So I'm going to convert it to a smart object. And for a number of reasons, but we'll look at those here in just a minute. So you'll notice that I have now a step in here, convert to smart object. And if I duplicate my layer, that one will show up too. So I'm going to transform Command T, and then actually I'll move my center pivot point here right down to this bottom line, and then right click and choose Flip Vertical, which will flip that type so that it is exactly reflected from the one above. Now part of that last one was it had some perspective happening, so you can right click and choose Perspective, and then grab one of these corners and just drag to the right to create some perspective, and then hit enter. We could go on and on and on, but for time's sake I'm going to just make a couple more adjustments, such as reducing the opacity and adding a filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Because this is a smart object blur, it will actually give me some more options with it by the time I'm done. So I'm going to say OK with it just a little bit blurry so it's not completely solid. And then I want to grab those two layers over here and link them by right clicking and choosing link. So now I have my effect completely done, but you know what, looking at that, it needs one more cool thing. So I'm on my solid layer, I'm going to double click on that and add a gradient overlay, which will by default add a white to black, and I'm going to reduce the opacity there so that it still has a little bit of a glow at the top, and then I'm going to set that to multiply, which means that Oh, nope, I'm not. Set it back to normal. And then click OK. All right, now this looks the way we want it. When you're all done, push stop. It's really fun when you forget to push stop and then you get an action with hundreds of actions inside it. So now we have our complete action and we need to test this out to see if it'll actually do what we want it to do. So come back to your history panel and again back up to where there was just the type layer and then come back to your actions and you'll notice that the action is still there. So it doesn't actually respond to your history panel after you're done recording. To run this action, you need to click on the actual action name. So each one of these are steps. That won't do any, it'll only do that step and the things below that. If you click on one of those, so you need to click on the awesome cast shadow one and then push play. And there it is. Now this is a much more functional action because I have a smart object with a duplicate that I can come into either one of these and change what this says. Save it, close it, and it will update my type out here. So this is a much more useful action than the default one that Photoshop came with. And you see this little cutoff edge over here? I'm going to come back in and fix that because it's really bothering me. That just means the type is overlapping the edge there, so I'm grabbing my move tool and just shifting it over and then saving and closing, which will update both of my smart object layers. And in a nutshell, that's a very basic action. You can create a number of steps and have them repeated with just a button click, and there's so many possibilities, and the next couple of tutorials will get into those.